Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm so excited you're here with us today. Let me start by asking you a very honest question.
Ooh, I like starting with the tough questions.
Right. Have you ever felt like you know a lot of English grammar, like you've memorized the vocabulary, you've done all those fill in the blank exercises, and you get great test scores.
hmm
But when you actually sit down to talk to a native speaker, the conversation still feels kind of, I don't know, a little stiff, like you're a robot just delivering data, and it doesn't sound entirely natural.
That is an incredibly common plateau.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're feeling that right now, you are definitely not alone.
Totally.
You put all this hard work into learning the rules of the language, but real life doesn't sound like a grammar textbook.
No, it really doesn't.
There's this frustrating missing piece,
Okay.
between knowing the mechanics of English and truly connecting with people using the language.
Exactly. And that is exactly what we're going to fix today. Today's goal is to bridge that gap for you. I was studying some fascinating real-life examples of intermediate English conversations lately. I spent hours analyzing everyday interactions, and we've narrowed it down to the absolute most important tricks to help you sound completely natural.
Which is so helpful.
We're stepping away from the textbooks entirely to look at how real people actually talk to each other.
But before we jump into those examples,
Yeah.
we really need to establish the golden rule of this deep dive.
Oh, yes, the golden rule.
This is the core philosophy you need to keep in mind moving forward. Making mistakes is completely normal.
Absolutely normal.
In fact, making mistakes actually helps you learn faster. The secret to beautiful English communication isn't about being 100% perfect with your verb tenses. It's about focusing on connecting with people and genuinely having fun with the language.
I love that rule so much. Connection over perfection. Okay, so let's unpack the first scenario I studied. I wanted to look at a classic workplace chat.
A great place to start. Building connections at work can be really stressful when you're speaking a second language.
It's super stressful. So I analyzed a conversation between two coworkers meeting for the very first time. There's Sarah, who's been working in the marketing department for about 6 months.
Okay.
And there's David, who is the brand new guy on the creative team. They're just having lunch together in the office cafeteria.
It's the perfect setting to study, really. Being the new person at work is a universal experience. You want to be professional, but you also want to be friendly and show your personality.
Right. And it's a tricky balance to strike when you're filtering everything through a second language.
It really is. So how does the conversation start?
Well, let's look at how Sarah starts it. I noted she doesn't use a stiff, formal greeting. Like, to give you an example of what we usually learn in school, she could have said, "Hello, are you David? I am Sarah."
Very robotic.
Exactly. But she doesn't do that. Instead, she walks up and says, "You must be David, the new guy on the creative team." It's so warm and natural.
What's fascinating here is the psychology behind that specific phrase.
Yeah.
Saying, "You must be David," shows that she already knows a little bit about him, which instantly makes him feel seen and welcome. It's a brilliant conversation starter.
That makes a lot of sense.
But what's equally important is how David replies. If somebody says, "You must be David," a nervous learner might just say, "Yes, I am."
Right. And then what happens? Just awkward silence.
Exactly. If you just say yes or no, the conversation stops. It hits a wall. The other person has to do all the heavy lifting to keep the talk alive.
Which is why I loved his actual response. Instead of just, yes, he expands his answer. He says, "That's me. I was actually hoping to meet more people from other departments."
That's a classic skill you can use right now. We call it expanding.
Expanding.
Let's give you a concrete formula for this. It's simply answer plus one detail. He answered the question by saying, "That's me." And then he adds that one extra piece of information about hoping to meet more people.
Right.
That extra detail acts like a hook.
Yeah.
It gives Sarah something new to talk about, which keeps the conversation moving smoothly.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If you're a B1 or B2 learner and you're already nervous about just answering the question correctly, isn't expanding your answer incredibly intimidating?
That's a very fair point.
What if you freeze up trying to think of that extra detail?
It can feel intimidating at first,
Yeah.
but the secret is that the detail doesn't have to be brilliant or complicated. It just has to be true.
Oh, I like that. Just true.
If someone asks, "Did you have a good weekend?" your answer plus one detail could just be, "Yes, I did. I finally watched that new movie on Netflix."
Yeah, that's really simple.
It's simple vocabulary, but it instantly gives the other person permission to say, "Oh, what movie?" You're just tossing them a ball they can easily catch.
That makes a lot of sense. You're giving them an easy follow-up. Okay, back to Sarah and David.
Let's hear it.
Sarah asks him how his first week is going, and here's where it gets really interesting. David admits that it's been a bit overwhelming. Yeah. Now, Sarah could just say, "Oh, that's too bad," or "Good luck." But she doesn't. Instead, she shares her own story. She says, "I remember feeling completely lost when I started here 6 months ago."
This is the aha moment of this entire workplace interaction.
It really is.
When you're learning a language, it's easy to focus only on answering the questions you're asked, kind of like a job interview. But sharing your own similar experience is the fastest way to make someone feel comfortable.
It creates an instant bond.
Precisely.
Mm.
When Sarah says she also felt lost, she's telling David, "You're safe here. We've all been in your shoes."
That is so empathetic. And because she makes him feel safe, their conversation flows so naturally from there. I was analyzing how they balance professional talk with personal talk.
How do they handle that?
They talk about work a bit. Sarah mentions her department is starting a new campaign for a tech startup that makes apps for small businesses. They talk about some everyday office things. But then they easily transition into personal hobbies.
That balance is absolutely crucial. If you only talk about work, the relationship stays very cold. But if you only talk about personal things too soon, it might feel unprofessional. They mix it perfectly.
They do.
And what stands out to you about how they handle those personal topics?
Well, I found a really great trick here that I want to highlight for everyone listening. David mentions that he's really into hiking and rock climbing outside of work.
Very active.
Very active. Now, Sarah doesn't hike. If you're Sarah in this situation, you might panic a little. You could just say, "I don't like that," which might sound a bit rude, and completely stop the conversation. Or you could pretend to be interested, which is just exhausting. But instead, she gracefully pivots.
What does she say?
She says, "I'm more of an indoor person, to be honest. I love reading, and I'm taking a cooking class to make pasta from scratch."
That is such a smooth transition.
Yeah.
Notice what she does there. She acknowledges what he said by contrasting it with being an indoor person, but she comfortably introduces her own interests.
Yeah.
A lot of learners think they need to agree with everything to be polite. But you don't have to share the same hobbies as someone to have a great conversation with them. You just have to be willing to share what you genuinely enjoy.
It's so true. I mean, if someone talks to me about running marathons, I just laugh and tell them my idea of a marathon is watching 6 hours of reality TV.
Exactly.
You can build a connection on your differences just as easily as your similarities.
Authenticity is way more charming than forced agreement.
And her authentic pivot leads to the best part of their chat. Because she mentions cooking, David admits he's terrible in the kitchen and basically lives on frozen meals.
A classic setup.
Right. So Sarah offers to teach him to cook once she masters making pasta, and then she invites him to get drinks with the team at a casual bar on Friday.
As an intermediate speaker, a great rule of thumb for you is to look for these natural off-ramps into future plans.
Future plans, yes.
By inviting him to Friday drinks and offering a future cooking lesson, Sarah turns a simple one-time chat into a real, ongoing friendship. That is how you close the deal in a friendly conversation. You establish a clear opportunity to talk again.
Yes, concrete future plans. It takes the pressure off feeling like you have to say everything in one single lunch break.
Exactly.
So we've seen how to build a connection from scratch with a stranger at work. But what happens when you already have a deep connection with someone, but the stakes are much higher?
Oh, that's a completely different situation.
It requires a completely different emotional toolkit. So I also looked at a completely different situation, a serious family discussion.
That is a brilliant pivot. Talking to family about serious life issues in English or handling any emotionally heavy topic requires a lot of nuance. It's not just about vocabulary anymore, it's about tone.
Exactly. Let me set the scene I was studying. We have a young man named Jake. He graduated from university about a year ago. He's currently working at a local bookstore, and he feels really lost about his future.
That's a tough spot to be in.
It is, and his mom, Emma, wants to sit down and talk about his career and his life plans.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a conversation that could instantly turn into a defensive argument.
It really could. If we role-play the bad version of this, the mom comes in and says, "What are you doing with your life? Why are you still at the bookstore?" That instantly puts Jake on the defensive.
Naturally.
But I was amazed by how they actually handled it. Emma's tone is brilliant. She's so warm. She starts the conversation by saying, "I just want to understand what you're thinking."
Let's pause right there, because that is so powerful.
Isn't it?
By saying, "I just want to understand," she immediately lowers the tension. She creates a safe space. When you're having a difficult conversation in English, starting with a statement of curiosity rather than a statement of judgment changes the entire dynamic.
It really does change everything. Because of that safe space, Jake drops his guard and confesses his real fears. He tells his mom that he feels behind because all his friends are so confident about their college majors and their high-paying jobs.
That comparison trap is so real.
And this is where Emma does something incredible. She uses a technique called reframing. She tells him, that actually sounds very mature. There's nothing wrong with taking time to make an informed decision.
Reframing is a wonderful communication tool, and you don't need advanced grammar to do it. Jake presents his feeling, his anxiety and hesitation as a negative thing.
Yeah, right.
Emma takes that exact same feeling and labels it as a positive trait. Maturity. It completely changes how Jake views his own situation.
I actually pulled some specific positive feedback phrases from their conversation that you can use in your own life when you're supporting a friend or a family member.
Let's hear them.
Emma uses simple, effective phrases like, that's not a bad idea at all, and I'm glad you're being realistic. These are such great supportive sentences to keep in your back pocket.
They're incredibly validating. It tells the other person that they're being heard and respected. And notice what Emma doesn't do here. She doesn't just give Jake a rigid list of instructions on what to do next.
Right. I notice she completely avoids giving strict, bossy advice. Instead, Jake asks her if she always knew she wanted to work in healthcare. And Emma shares a personal story.
Storytelling is so effective.
She tells him that when she was his age, she originally wanted to be an elementary school teacher. But during her second year, she took a biology class, completely fell in love with it, and changed her entire direction to nursing.
If we analyze why this works so well, it's because telling a personal story makes your advice much more credible.
But let me ask you this. Wouldn't it have been faster for Emma to just say, Jake, it's okay to change your mind? Why go through the whole story about the biology class and the teaching degree?
Because it's okay to change your mind is a cliche. It sounds like something you read on a greeting card.
That's a good point.
When you're upset, hearing a cliche feels dismissive. But by sharing her own messy journey of changing from teaching to nursing, she proves that her advice is true. She shows vulnerability. Stories build trust in a way that direct advice rarely does.
That is a profound distinction. Showing, not just telling. And that trust leads them to a beautiful compromise. They negotiate so respectfully.
How do they compromise?
Jake explains that he actually likes his bookstore job right now because he's learning about inventory management and customer service. So instead of quitting in a panic, he suggests taking some community college classes in the spring to test out his interests.
It's a great example of finding a middle ground. He's taking a small, actionable step without making a terrifying, life-altering decision.
And just like in the workplace conversation, they end with action. They make a concrete plan to sit down together that weekend and look at community college websites. It's not just a vague idea, they have a specific next step.
Whether you're making a new friend at work or navigating a deep family discussion, establishing that clear next step is what gives the conversation real-world impact. It proves that the conversation actually mattered.
Absolutely. Now, while I was studying both of these conversations, the casual work chat and the serious family talk, I noticed something really cool underneath the surface. I discovered what I like to call the secret sauce vocabulary.
Oh, the secret sauce. I love this. Break it down for us. What is the recipe?
I noticed these little words acting almost like glue in both conversations. They're tiny, but they hold the whole discussion together and make it sound incredibly natural. I'm talking about conversational connectors.
Connectors are so important.
Words like, honestly, to be honest, actually, speaking of which, and that sounds amazing.
Those words are absolute gold for B1 and B2 learners. Often when you learn a language, you're taught to speak in separate, independent sentences. Let's do a role play to show the difference.
Okay, let's do it.
Without connectors, you sound like this. I am an indoor person. I like to read. I am taking a cooking class. It's grammatically perfect, but it sounds robotic.
Totally robotic.
But when you use a connector, the whole thing flows. It softens the edges. Listen to the difference. I'm an indoor person, to be honest. I love reading, and actually, I'm taking a cooking class. It feels relaxed. It connects the thoughts organically.
Speaking of which, is one of my absolute favorites. When David mentions he had a tough interview process, Sarah says, speaking of which, how did you end up in marketing?
It's so smooth.
It's the perfect way to change the subject slightly without it feeling random or rude. You just hook your new topic onto whatever was just said.
It's brilliant because it shows you're actively listening. You're taking their thought, acknowledging it, and building on it. It says, your idea just sparked my idea.
Can you give us another example of how to use speaking of which in daily life, just so we really nail it down for the listener?
Sure. Let's say you're talking to a friend, and they mentioned they're tired because they stayed up late watching a basketball game. You could say, oh, speaking of which, did you see the email about the company's sports tournament next month? You use their mention of sports as a bridge to your topic.
I love that. It's so seamless. And alongside those connectors, I also pulled out a few power phrases from the serious family talk.
Power phrases.
Yes. Now, I want to be clear. These aren't stiff corporate phrases. These are phrases that are easy to understand, but using them instantly elevates your English level and makes you sound incredibly grounded.
What did they say?
Emma and Jake used some really sophisticated but accessible phrases. For example, when they talked about Jake taking those community college classes, Emma said it would help him maintain forward momentum.
Oh, that is a fantastic phrase for an intermediate learner. Maintain forward momentum. It just means keeping things moving ahead, not getting stuck.
Exactly. And when Jake defended his bookstore job, he said it was giving him financial stability while he figured things out.
Financial stability. That sounds so much more mature than just saying, I need money.
Right.
It shows he's thinking long-term about being reliable and secure.
Right. And my favorite was when Jake agreed to look at those community college websites. He said it would help him get back into an academic mindset.
Academic mindset. Framing his thought process like that is brilliant. These phrases demonstrate that you can navigate adult, nuanced topics with real confidence. They sound very native, but they aren't overly complicated to pronounce or remember.
Absolutely. There's such great tools to have ready. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I think the grand takeaway from all the research I did for this deep dive is this. Beautiful English communication is not about using fancy, complicated grammar.
No, it's really not.
It's not about memorizing the dictionary or having a flawless accent.
Precisely. The textbook gives you the paint, but these conversational tools let you actually paint the picture. It's about showing genuine interest in the other person.
Yes.
It's about using the answer plus one detail formula. It's about asking follow-up questions and building real human relationships through language. You can have B1 level grammar, but if you know how to expand your answers, share a relatable story to make someone feel safe, and use a connector like, actually, you are a master communicator.
Yes. Master communicator status is totally within your reach today. So here's my direct challenge for you this week.
I love a good challenge.
I want you to go out and have at least one meaningful conversation in English. Try to intentionally use the tools we talked about today. Ask a follow-up question. Share a quick personal story to relate to them. And try to use just one natural connector, like actually, or speaking of which, try it once. See how it changes the flow.
It's a fantastic challenge. And as you step out to practice this week, I want to leave you with a final, slightly deeper thought to mull over on your own.
Okay, let's hear it.
We often talk about how learning a language gives you new words. But consider this. When you start using these natural, empathetic conversation techniques in English, when you intentionally try to make others feel safe, when you share your stories, instead of giving bossy advice, when you actively look for connection, does stepping into this fluent mindset actually change your personality a little bit when you speak it?
Oh, wow.
Does speaking a kinder, more connected version of English actually make you a more connected person overall?
I absolutely love that thought. Does the language change you? Does the empathy translate into who you are? That is something incredible to think about as you go out into the world this week. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Go have those amazing conversations. Use your secret sauce vocabulary. Remember that mistakes are how you learn. And we will see you next time.